We're excited to talk about the Bible and want to be faithful to examine as much of the text as possible. Unfortunately, we can't cover everything in a Sunday sermon, and lots of study and material get left on the cutting room floor. These episodes are our attempt to continue the conversation and cover as much of the Bible as we can. So welcome to the cutting room floor.
Welcome back to another episode of Cutting Room Floor. Glad you guys are here watching with us, and I'm glad that you guys have joined with us today. We've got Elder Seth with us alongside of Mr. Jim and Mr. Devin. Thank you guys for being a part of this and watching these. As always, if you have any curiosities, questions during the watching of this video, make sure to throw those in the comments. Ask those questions or shoot off emails to the church office, and we'll see if we can't answer them or feature them in one of our upcoming videos. With that, I think send us on. Let's head on.
Okay, so I think this is a really exciting spot. So far through the narrative, all the way back at Genesis, we've kind of talked about these landmark moments that keep becoming callback things. You know, Genesis 3 was a big one, and then Abrahamic covenant was another big one that gets referenced all the time. The Exodus from Egypt, everything's a callback, and this moment on the mountain between Moses and God is another one of those just landmark times where it's like, oh, it's almost impossible for us to not look at all the forward casting things that are a callback to here. So there's a lot that I kind of want to talk about in that area, but it does make us jump pretty far in the timeline. But this is another major moment. So, but to start off, I guess to kick off that idea is I kind of want to know if there's any indication. There's nothing that comes directly to mind, but Moses goes up on the mountain for 40 days and receives the law. You know, it's one of those number things that pops into your head. And I was thinking about Jesus in the wilderness. You know, he's just been baptized, Holy Spirit descends and all that stuff, and then he goes into the wilderness. And I'm almost wondering if in this really moment of declaration of who Jesus says he is, and then he goes away for 40 days, what we saw when Moses goes up the mountain to meet with Yahweh, the people, they get restless and they start breaking the law directly. And I'm kind of wondering if the people who are following Jesus and intrigued by what it is that he's saying and doing, and maybe early followers, do we have any indication of what they were up to when he's in the wilderness for 40 days? Or is that just an unknown thing?
Do we have any indication of what Jesus's followers are doing during his 40 days?
Yeah.
They aren't called yet, right, at that point?
There's people around.
Okay. But he hasn't, I mean, and maybe the chronology of the New Testament's interesting to follow, I guess I would say. But it almost implies that they aren't called until after that. But I think that's my recollection of the Gospels. But can I speak, as you're stating this, I'm thinking of something that really struck me as really interesting. And that is, I've been very interested in the whole idea of Christian identity. And Henry Nouwen, I'm trying to remember the name of the book, Life of the Beloved, talks about, that whole book's on Christian identity and Jesus being the beloved, we're beloved, and there's other studies, live into your identity. And the interesting thing is he's tempted in the desert, and it seems like every one of those temptations is wrapped around identity, and giving of the law, is part of Israel's identity. That law, the people he calls them to be through the law is wrapped up in their identity, I think. I mean, I don't know if anybody agrees. Do you agree with that, David?
That the temptations are wrapped up in his identity, and that the law is wrapped up in identity? Yeah, I would 100% agree.
Okay.
I would 100% agree. And in fact, 2 sermons from now, which I'm writing, and in fact, 2 sermons from now, that's a part of the point that I'm wanting to make over the next couple sermons, is that this identity question is so important for what's going on. Not only does the law identify who the Israelites will be and calls them into a vocation of being, but it's also a display of God's character simultaneously. And interestingly enough, the serpent's temptation is not just a miscommunication that he's trying to clear up. He's giving misinformation about what's being said. But it's not just around the words. It's also around God's character and nature. God does, he wants you to take the fruit.
Right.
That's it. That's an identity. That's a character and nature claim. And so I find that interesting. And I think that's also, as far as Christian identity goes, in the same way that the Israelites are formed by what God reveals about himself and what he tells them to be as a result, that's what Jesus is doing as well. I think that, what does it mean to be identified by God or to bear his name, as Exodus 20 would talk about? Well, it means to adopt his way of seeing and to live his way of being. I mean, that's what it means to carry that identity. And I think it's as simple as I'm God's child. And we see that in Israel's son. Israel is the son, Exodus 4. And we see that fully pictured in Jesus. And then we see that claim coming, John 1. I mean, sons of light rather than sons of darkness, and 1 John. And I mean, we could just keep going on and on about how we're supposed to like more each day adopt that identity, progressively adopt the identity that I am a child of God, therefore I carry his name, therefore I live these ways.
And I think that identity, it has to have a fountainhead source.
I like that.
And so what we're seeing in the 40 days and in the temptations of Jesus, first of all, Jesus is like us, but he's not exactly us, in that he has no sin. So his temptation is coming from without, from the outside, where our temptation comes from within, because the enemy has leverage within us for that. And so we also see Jesus establishing his identity in that he immediately goes to Scripture. He goes back to God's word in his when he's being tempted. And I see that as a reconciliation, a reclaiming of what Adam, the first Adam, fails to do. Instead of, Adam buys into did God really say?
Right.
Jesus is firm in his proclamation of Scripture. But that identity, again, coming back to that fountainhead idea, for us to be able to don a new identity, it has to be something that is transcendent of us in our human condition, and this is what he's establishing, because we talk about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus, but we also have to remember it's his life that he lived for us, and that, I think that's one of those shining moments of the life that he's living, that he is taking on life, or living life correctly for us.
Yeah, I like what you said about the response to the temptations is with Scripture, and that undoing or counter to the early Genesis account. And if you think about the way that the serpent presents well, did God really say? And then Eve's response isn't outright wrong, but it is a deviation from what God actually said, where Jesus's response is a clarification. It really sticks to what he said and who he is. And then thinking about what Jim said about identity, all these temptations that are put before him are kind of presented, I think most of them are presented in if you are really the Son of God. So it is not just in a challenge of, well, do you hold this power or whatever? Do you hold this authority? If you are, do it. And it's like, oh, okay. His response to it is also one where it's like, well, I am, and I'm not going to, I guess, not misuse it, but he has to be a proper representative of the authority and power he holds, and that it holds to what God says, I think, is the clarifying thing.
Really good. That's really good.
It has to be a proper,
I don't remember what I just
I know, but I'm saying, but
representative.
Representative.
Which
as do we,
As do
right?
we.
That's
As do we, but I don't
why I
even
wanted
know
to
if-
repeat it. As do we.
Yeah, I think as do we is appropriate, but I don't know if representative is the right way to put it when we're talking about Jesus, who is one with
Right,
the Father.
right.
So, however you want to parse that out. I think
But I
you
think
know what
I think
mean.
representative too,
think
as
it's
we think of
No?
the second
Okay.
Adam, you know,
Okay, yeah,
and
sure.
he's representing the first Adam. I don't think that's far off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to steer in a human representative sense.
Yes.
But not in any way that would divide him from
Absolutely.
his oneness with
Absolutely.
the Father and the
Which is
Holy
really
Spirit.
important.
Yeah.
Now you asked where are the people at this point. We don't really have much in the. I was just as we were talking here, I was looking through the gospel accounts on when the temptation occurs. It's not really in Matthew. It's after Jesus does the testing in the wilderness that he calls his first disciples.
Okay.
So at least Matthew has that expressly stated. However, it's a little less known there in Luke and a little less in Mark as well. So I think I would opt with the one express voice that we have,
Okay.
which would be that they're kind of doing their own thing.
Okay. I don't know if it was a useful question.
but
I was just
no,
looking for parallels.
I think it was awesome because of the identity thing, but also I think it bears repeating. Both had opportunity for temptation. Jesus conquered the temptation, and the Hebrews miserably failed the temptation.
As do we.
As do we, yes.
And I think that there's something to point out too in the Moses situation here with God when he's receiving the identity, the full-throated identity of Yahweh there in 34. I think it's like 6 through whatever it is. Yeah, 6 through like 8 or 7, 6 through 7. It like we know that Satan in the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, he's asking, well, you framed it really well. If you are this, then you can do this and will do this and will display it these ways, which is not dissimilar to I think what Aaron's like viewpoint is. In the re-identification of what Yahweh, what and who Yahweh is, we can mold that, to use maybe pun intended. We can mold that to our usage. I think that's what Satan is attempting to do here with the Son of God. Is he's making an identity question to tempt Jesus into molding Jesus into the identity that Satan would prefer.
That is
if that
so
makes sense.
sneaky
It's
and
so
probably more prominent than I'd like to think it is. The temptation to just wholesale pick a brand new god
Right.
almost seems silly, but in we're trying to do the Jesus following thing, but that constant tweaking and remolding of who he is, that is idolatry. It's like,
Absolutely.
oh, wow, that's tricky.
And so then Jesus's response is, in a roundabout way, saying I am God by utilizing the words of Scripture. And it's interesting that all of his words of Scripture come from Deuteronomy, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
still a part of the Exodus narrative, of course. So I just, which would be Moses's words to the people in his prophetic, because he kind of takes on a prophetic ministry post mediator and intercessory role here specifically in Exodus. Not that he doesn't continue to do that, because he does. We have the bronze snake. We've got all kinds of stuff going on in Numbers.
Yeah.
Where that mediary intercessory role is still enacted, still going. But in Deuteronomy, it seems that there's a real shift.
I think so too, because also the people he's addressing is different.
Yeah.
For the law that he receives in Exodus, it is to the crowd that's in front of him, and this is who you are and what's expected of you. Moses knows he's not going into the land once we make it to Deuteronomy, and it's a whole nother generation that's going in. So it is forward casting as far as this is where you're going. Take this with you and this identity and who God is. Like I think it has to shift to a almost prophetic declaration, because it is cast in the near future.
And now I'm thinking too about the temptations. The first one would be Genesis, Garden of Eden. And the second would be Exodus narrative. And the third would be Nation of Israel. Okay, so the first one would be. Okay, I was just looking at it. I should know it. Just now that I've looked at it. Hold on, let me just make sure I've got it all right, and maybe I have my categories overlapping a little bit, and that's okay too, probably. So the first one is, man shall not live on bread alone.
Manna.
So we've got manna, but we've also got food, right?
Right.
Which would be Genesis and Exodus. So maybe we could combine those. Then the second one would be truly Exodus. Don't test the Lord your God, which is literally what happens in Exodus 16 through 18, where they're testing the Lord with there's no water out here and all this stuff. Okay. And then finally, it's go up to the high place. And is it mentioned specifically that it goes, no, just a high mountain. Goes to a high mountain, and it's a kingdom and lordship kind of question. How will these kingdoms bow down to you? Which is again the establishment of the kingdom of Israel later on in Saul and David. So that's kind of interesting that it also maps on the. Okay, we could keep.
It would be interesting if that mountain, even though it's unnamed, if that would be like the Mount of Transfiguration. Does that tie into Mount Hermon? Yeah.
I'm suspicious about that too.
Yeah.
The more you look at it, the more you're like, what kind of? I smell something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question
Okay.
about the way you presented it on Sunday. There was, I want to say, analogy as far as there's the marriage proposal at the base of the mountain.
Yeah.
You know, and then the infidelity of setting up their own idol, and then the way you worded it was God is proposing or saying that a divorce is on the table,
Yeah.
or whatever. And I'm immediately where my mind goes is like, oh, I can think further along in the narrative where this type of imagery is used with like Hosea's wife and that type of thing. I'm wondering, has this type of language already been used in the narrative, or are we just kind of building an analogy that's helpful to kind of frame what's going on?
Oh.
Because we've talked about, identity and what God means as far as what is a firstborn son and status and all that stuff. And that really helps frame what is expected of this nation to me. And I'm wondering, I found the marriage analogy very, very helpful. I'm wondering, is that something that we've seen mapped on here yet? But as far as a, family framework identity analogy, we've been talking sonship all through the narrative so far. And I'm wondering, is this a point where that shifts to, okay, now we're talking relationally between a group of people and God.
Yeah.
Does the framework,
Okay.
the useful framework of a familial analogy shift to that of a bridegroom?
I think both are still on the table.
Okay.
So and the one of the books that I've been reading alongside this series, which I just happened to pick up back up again, they talk about how Jewish writing is intentionally recursive, so it comes back on itself on purpose, so that it can not just give you one concept, but so that it can give you multiple concepts. So the image is either holographic or the sound is fully orbed or something like that.
Right.
So it's like multiple speakers. So I think the sonship thing is still very much on the table, and we're going to actually pick that thread up with David. I mean, specifically with David, much later on in the story. But no, and also the marriage stuff gets picked up in the prophets, particularly later on as well. So, and I think they're pairing off of what's going on here in the narrative, and how Moses will talk about the relationship with God. So I think both things are still on the table, and in fact, both. Is it an analogy or metaphor? I think metaphor here.
Sure.
I think both metaphors are going to give us a stereo sound.
I agree. I think maybe more specifically, my question is: this a framework that you've used to help us understand what's going on here, or has that kind of language been used in the narrative so far, or did it pop up here and I missed it?
No. Okay, great question. Yeah, no, it's really more utility here.
Okay.
Than it is like expressly said. I think sonship is still the primary metaphor being used for covenant terms. But even still, familial, even extending to a marriage covenant, which we're talking in terms of covenant, is not off the table. I wouldn't say, but no, there's no express. It's not as express as it gets in Hosea and Jeremiah, and you get it.
That's why I was wondering, because there was definitely it pings things that I'm familiar with,
Right.
and I was wondering if I'd missed it so far, but I did find it very, very useful. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. I got another one, unless Jim, Seth, you got anything?
No, you Please.
Okay. You asked several questions on Sunday, and I just want to talk about it more. One of the ones that really stuck with me is God required to maintain a relationship with someone who doesn't want to? You know, we've been really distilling down the covenants have gotten more and more specific as we've gone, even though the audience has gotten broader, and the identity of God keeps getting clearer and clearer, and the identity and expectation of his people is getting clearer and clearer and more specific, and then they rebel. So if what that made me think of is like, well, with the covenant that God cuts with Abraham, he's the only one who passes through. God is very clear on, I will uphold this end, my end of the covenant, whether you obey or not, is kind of our takeaway on it. And now we're seeing that in action with a collective, not even individuals, because we saw, you know, each one of our, you know, early patriarchs, is that what you would call them?
Yeah.
You know, zigzag until they finally decided to walk with God.
Right.
But now we're talking about a collective, and they're doing the exact same thing, trying to achieve something by their own schemes and their own meaning, and, you know, identifying things their own way. And God's response, you know, we could pretty well come to a conclusion if we looked at, well, how does God respond to Abraham's disobedience or Isaac's or Jacob? Like, yeah, there's a definite character arc that happens for them. But in this moment, they rebel almost immediately in a very specific way. First two commandments broken real hard. And then this dialogue that happens between God and Moses, it seems like God's ready to take the offer off the table.
Yeah.
And I think as I'm reading it, and trying to read it with fresh eyes, I think as I'm reading it, I find that almost startling that
Oh yeah.
he would say, like, I will uphold this covenant. It's on me. And we're like, okay, now things have gone sideways again. He's like, it's over. New plan. I'm like, wow, wait, that doesn't quite track.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, okay, well, Moses's response to that is one that doesn't, I'm not going to say like calls to account or challenges, but reminds, as much as you can remind God of something, of his covenant with his people. And I don't know, it just became very, very exciting reading through that section in an unsettling way. That I think if I framed it wrong, I could say like, well, God waffles as far as his plan. But the way that you framed it is, again, it's this kind of formative moment where he's setting up Moses to be a participant in what it is he's actually called people to do. Can you talk about that more?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, so at the root of that is God required to maintain a relationship with those who rebel against him. So, I mean, how does that question strike you guys?
Well, my take would almost immediately be God is not obligated to anything.
Exactly. Yeah. I would. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
No sign.
Except how it comes back to his character.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
So he is not going to do violence
Yes.
to his own character.
That's the, I guess, the tension that I'm in as I'm reading it then, because I would be like, wait, well, this is in contrast to what you promised, but it's also, the conversation's not over. I think God is leading Moses to a
And then who is the tension for?
And
Is the tension for God? You know, for God to figure it out. Okay, I'm here. Well, you know, they did this. You know, I mean, or is that tension really for Moses' benefit? For by extension our benefit. You know.
now that you say it like that, what it calls to mind is when we were talking about Abraham and Isaac, and that, like, okay, what's really being proved here?
Yeah.
Did God really need to know that Abraham was believing that God would do something? Like, I think God knew, but also what's being proved is God will provide himself the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And I think this is another instance where the challenge is there on the table. What is really being proved? What's being proved is that God will uphold his end of the covenant.
Yeah.
So as we discuss this, the thing that's going through my head is, what a moment for Moses, right? Like what I mean, the term that comes to my mind is what a freak out moment for Moses. Like what, what?
Yeah, right.
This is not the God I've come to know.
Yes.
No, right? Yeah, that's what goes through my mind.
Which I think so. All of that that you guys have just expressed, I think, is exactly accords with what my answer would be, which is that no, I don't think God's required, and I frame that question on purpose that way, because no, I don't think God is required, and I would even appeal to a passage like Romans chapter 1, which is that when God's wrath is displayed, it's actually it's generally not a flood situation or the destruction of a nation or something like that. Generally what it is he'll just take his hands off, and he'll just allow, in the same way that he leads the Egyptians into their own destruction. It's something like that. I'll just let your wickedness produce its own end.
Does it look like the hardening of Pharaoh's heart?
Potentially, and which is even on the table for Paul as he thinks about how God's sovereignty interacts with our free will in Romans 9-11. I mean, that's a part of what Paul is like pondering through and trying to grasp on. So I think God's wrath, at least in light of the New Testament, looks a lot less like, and looks a lot more like, okay, you got it, buddy.
And yet didn't he command them to go through the camp
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's it. All things in tension, all things held differently. But I would say, in light of the New Testament, the way that God has desired to operate is because the Son is now fully revealed, not veiled as a mystery in times past, which Paul would say, right? So now that the Son is fully revealed, the modus operandi of God, not that he himself has changed, but maybe his way of interacting has been updated, has been amplified, to include the full incarnation of Jesus. So now on this side of the cross, it's much harder for us to say that is God's wrath, this is God's grace. You get what I'm trying to say, because now the way that his kingdom moves forward is not as a result of his encounters like we might read in the Old Testament, Hezekiah, the 186,000 army that's defeated by the death angel or whatever, things like that. I don't know that we can put our finger on that as specifically as the biblical texts in the Old Testament are describing. Now the way that the kingdom of God moves forward is through the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, right? Like that. Sure. That's now God's new. It was always his plan, but plan reiterated now that the church is on the scene. So what I'm hitting on here, the thread that I'm pulling on, is that there's a progressive revealing of God's way of interacting. Okay. It's always at its heart the same thing. I desire that I would be their God and they would be my people, and that we're going to be in presence with one another. And I mean presence physically and presence spiritually. So that's always been the plan, but the way that God has to interact with us due to the ways that we respond to his offer is responsive. And so then the way he deals with us is progressively rolled out across these covenants, to and formational encounters, I would say. So Abraham, I think, maps onto this Moses moment, what we've just read. So is it that like this tension you're identifying? I think the tension's there on purpose because it's pressing us to think deeply about what it is that God is supposed to remember. You know what I mean? And so, in other words, God is leading Moses to a formational encounter in which he can deal with Moses specifically. And he's doing the same with the nation. And he's doing the same now with us, but through Christ. So it depends on where we are in the story and what covenants are operative for us to understand how God is interacting with his people. Now that doesn't mean that the way we relate to him is essentially different. In other words, there's not a covenant of works and then a covenant of grace. It's all grace the whole time. It's all God's gracious offer of himself. Does that make sense? And apart from the law, Abraham can have a relationship with God because of faith. It has nothing to do with the law. The law is pointing us to the fact that we need faith in order to have a relationship. The way we enter the new covenant is via faith in Jesus Christ. Like Like there's not a distinguishing in different administrations or different time periods where God's mode of salvation is different. It's always been about faith, but maybe the way that he's calling us into that relationship updates and expands, or distills and stacks. I don't know what the right words are to get to the right metaphor. So this progressive covenantal revealing and God's identity, as well as the nation of Israel's identity revealing, all also is important to how we interact with that tension.
I think that's a good way to put it, is that like leading from one covenant to the next one never becomes no longer this, now this.
Correct.
That progressive
Yes.
covenantalism thing
That's
is
right.
is what is the mode that distills it down and gives it direction and clarifies identity and all that stuff.
Well
And
said.
what can we do as humans in our human condition if God does not reveal himself to us?
Yeah, we're lost in our sins.
Yeah, and we're lost. And so, and what would we do if God revealed everything about himself immediately?
Right.
You know, where would we be positionally if that were to happen? And so, does that also play into this progressive rollout of God revealing himself?
I think
love
it's
that you
part
said
of the theme of formation that we keep hitting on.
Right.
Is I think he leads you to the next step of walking with him. You know,
Yeah. And I think even Paul hits on this. I'm trying to remember the passage, but we will be changed a degree of glory at a time.
Oh.
Like this is how God, I need to look up the passage. I'm pretty sure it's Paul. I could be lying to everybody though.
And isn't it interesting that Paul, if I'm connecting this right, when Paul talks about, he talks about in ages to come. You know, to me, it gives a flavor that even beyond the veil, beyond when we're in our glorified bodies, God is still going to be revealing himself.
read it.
It's the passage, but in a different English translation that I read this past Sunday, actually. 2 Corinthians
that's funny.
chapter 3, verse 18.
It is specifically
mind.
pointing to this.
This exact thing.
Mountain.
And we all with unveiled face, talking about Moses and the borrowed light, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. And I think the NIV would render that ever increasing. So it's kind of like that. This is I think the way that God is doing this across time is for our formation. I think you're right, Seth. If God were to reveal all of himself all at once, well, we would have to fall down. We would fall down and die. I think that's I think that's the whole point. It's like we can't experience the fullness of his glory. We have to have a hand covering us
Right.
in a pass by.
Before we get too deep into that bit, because I want to talk about all that.
For sure.
But kind of off of that same question, but maybe redirect it a little bit. As far as when God says, because of their rebellion, he was like, I will not go with you. And he was like, if I did, I might destroy the people. Like, this is intense. And what kind of prompted in me is God saying, I won't go with you. I'm like, well, that's bad news, you know? And then I was kind of thinking, like, well, is it? Is it? And what it kind of pulled to mind, I know we just kind of mapped everything on top of Abraham, but it made me want to jump back to Genesis again. And that exile happens for Adam and Eve. Was that unkind? Is that the worst thing that could have happened versus allowing them to stay in the garden and eat of the tree of life? And then what is that? Eternal separation from God?
Yeah.
So in that sense, is this a repeat of I'm sending you out again and I will call you back to myself? Like there's the terms and you haven't followed, but I will reconcile you to myself. And so kind of pinging that off of the, God's not contradicting what he said before. He's not going back on his character. Well, if he's not doing either of those things, then what does that look like? I think it looks like what we've seen already in the garden. I think exile is a merciful response if the alternative is execution or let's say eternal separation.
Right.
So in that sense, you're going out and I'm not going with you. That's not it's not the worst.
Right.
Sure. Sure.
And it affords the opportunity for reconciliation, which is not something that humanity is going to accomplish on its own.
Right.
That takes God interceding on our behalf, which is really Moses's intercession for the Israelite people. Moses isn't adequate or able to do that.
Yeah.
How he really presents that is reminding God of his character and promise, so that God will do what it is he said he would do.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting when I think about, well, what does that look like if we try to intercede for one another? I have nothing in myself that I can offer to benefit anybody at this table, except to redirect our gaze back to what it is the Lord would ask of us, or what he would promise to deliver us from, or strengthen us through, or however you wanted to word it. The Christian signpost is maybe the way to put it, or whatever.
Yeah. It's bad in the sense that it's not the design, but it's merciful, as you said, in the sense that, a relationship is still on offer.
It's not abandonment.
It's not abandonment. And so, but it is like, this is what's pinging on my brain. It's something like, my plan and my design is to work through this nation that I promised I would with Abraham. But instead of doing that, I'm going to start a new nation with Moses. So that's interesting, because that also means that now I understand. I understand formational encounter. God's not going to forsake his people as a result of his own nature. Okay, so, but if we were to play that out as if it were that way, if we were to branch out and think through that for a moment, it means that the exclusivity of the nation of Israel as God's chosen people is always contingent upon God's favor, God's relational connection, God's covenantal word.
So I think when I was thinking about it on Sunday, I was thinking about God's kind of offer he puts on the table for Moses of like, well, I'll make a great nation out of you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, is this a dropping of the covenant that he made with the nation and a shift to something else? But then the way that you were talking just now made me think about God's use of the remnant
Right.
is probably more likely what's happening here. In the same way that it's like, he's promised, I will never flood the earth again. But even in that sense, Noah and his family were the remnant, So I don't think it's I'll just be done with this covenant plan entirely. Out of it, I will make something, So it's even in that sense, it's not a, never mind. I'm not going to do what I said before.
Correct. Yes, that's what I said.
I think having the right framework maybe it's the other way around, not having the right framework so I can recognize God's character. Maybe bringing God's character to mind allows me to arrive at the right framework for what is happening.
Love it.
That's really good. Yep.
I wish I had thought of that instead of chewing on it for a week. Oh, thanks, guys. I want to kind of ask you guys about last week we had kind of talked about how we talked a lot of like the tabernacle and some adornment stuff and all the things that happened there, as far as, well, what did the people do when they gathered together to make the golden calf?
Right.
And then versus what they did when it was time to tabernacle, and how it's like, okay, there's a lot of similarities there, but the heart posture is completely different.
Yeah.
And one of the really sweet things is just talking about this burning within men and women to come bring what they have as a free offering, that I thought was really, really great. But thinking about the posture of the people, depending on what's happening in front of them, when I think about the golden calf, I think the Israelites were like ready to make God on their own terms, and they were totally fine with that. But once God is like, never mind, or not never mind, but it's off the table. I will not go with you. It says the people are like greatly distressed by this.
Yeah.
So what does that mean as far as their readiness or our readiness to redefine who God is on our terms. But then to, like you said earlier, a lot of times what that looks like is God saying, taking his hands off and saying, all right, have it your way. Well, they're immediately distressed by that. It seems like they know that this isn't right either. You know, they wouldn't be satisfied to just like, well, okay, well, if the real Yahweh is not going to do it, we'll just all keep gathering around this golden calf. I mean, it's not there anymore, but like they don't go back to the plan that they'd already established for themselves. They're like, this is bad news.
Yeah.
What does that look like as far as, or what does that tell us about the people after their rebellion and God saying like, okay, this is how it's going to be? Or is that even, maybe I'm not phrasing this right. This is a dialogue that's happening between Moses and God. Is the nation aware of this? Or is this a side conversation that Moses says like, hey, this could have gone real bad, but God's going to go with us? Because I guess that's the other thing I didn't mention before is God says, I will not go with you. There's so much to unpack here. But by the end of the conversation, he says, I will go with you.
Yeah.
Is that something that the nation is privy to, or just Moses and Joshua maybe?
I think Moses is the only one privy to that particular conversation. Beforehand in 33, he tells the people the distressing news. God's going to send the angel ahead of us to help us get the land to fulfill the promise to Abraham, but his presence is not going to go with us. That's when they go, oh my gosh, we've done the wrong thing. Okay. And they take their, earrings and all this stuff, their ornaments off or whatever. And then we have the aside about Moses meeting in the tent of meeting. And then that's when now we pick the story back up after the aside and we continue the forward progression of Moses in the tent of meeting as he does regularly. And then what happens next is the passing by in the cleft of the rock. So then Moses comes down, radiant face, and he tells all the people once again, what God has told him.
So pause. In the conversation between Moses and God, when God's like, I will not go with you, I will send an angel with you. Then does Moses go to the people and tell them that, and then goes back to God, and then God says, I will go with you.
Yeah, after their conversation, that's when he says, I will go with you. And then when he comes down the mountain, radiant face, he's got the new stone tablets.
Right.
And that's when he tells the people once again all that the Lord had told him.
Okay.
And so that's when he tells the people what's occurred, what conversation I had, all of that.
Okay.
Which then generates the next chapter, which is what we're going to break into 2 weeks from now.
Okay. This is a great transition into my next question.
Can I?
Oh, go for it.
Well, and this is stepping back 2 weeks, but back to the golden calf. What's going through my mind is, what do they think is the plan? You know what I'm saying? They're sacrificing this golden calf, and yet they're out in the desert. What's plan? I mean, okay? You sacrificed this golden calf, but then what?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
the pillar of fire was going to go before you. God was going to be with you. But you think Moses is dead, and maybe you're distressed, and you think, we're in big trouble here because Moses is dead. But okay, then what? Then what? What's the rest of the plan after you sacrifice the golden calf?
That's what I
because
think
you don't have Yahweh anymore.
That's what I think was so.
But maybe they think that's Yahweh. That's their own Yahweh.
Exactly.
And yet I go to our sin, and what's our plan after the sin too, right?
Because if it was an instance of like, well, we'll just set up a wholesale brand new God that has nothing to do with the God that we've been interacting with, then it wouldn't make any sense, but that they are trying to redefine Yahweh and set up this image as his representative rather than
Moses
meeting with him and then asking for an intercessor or whatever through Moses or whatever kind of rounds that idea out more as far as like, oh, it doesn't fully disassociate them from everything they've witnessed so far. It just attributes all that's going on to this image now.
By the way, somewhere I read that a Bible scholar essentially projecting the idea that it wasn't that the golden calf was to replace Moses, not necessarily replace God, which is kind of interesting to think about.
Which
That's an interesting way
is an interesting way to frame it, especially because Aaron is the one that's doing it.
And I
And
thought,
you're saying Aaron ought to have been the successor if Moses
Well,
was dead?
Aaron is the one that's been.
Yeah.
Moses
Yeah.
has been God to the people. Aaron
Yeah.
has been the voice of God to the people.
and so,
Okay.
and I think too that the golden calf is and I'm not trying to boil this down to just good intentions,
Right.
but the golden calf is, you know,
Yeah.
is their attempt to
Correct.
this is how we think we can worship Yahweh.
Correct.
And so and then God is saying, no, I prescribe
Yes.
how I'm to be worshipped.
Yes.
And so it's almost like we're still kind of shaking off the grave clothes of Egypt.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in a sense too, just like, you know, God's telling people to cut Lazarus out of his grave clothes. Like all of us, we've got to have those grave clothes don't just automatically, you know, just all fall off. So we're hearing it's like echoes of Egypt, or put something clever in there, you know.
And this maps onto the way Paul would talk about it, right?
Right.
Mortify your sin.
Right? Yeah. Mhm.
Kill the old thing that was you and live into the new thing that is coming about as a result of Christ in you.
Right.
I mean, that's exactly the way to frame it. Yeah. They're getting rid of the grave clothes of Egypt. Yeah. I love the way
This guy.
he just says stuff so well.
We've done like 20 episodes without you.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's so good. Yeah. And so, no, so absolutely. What is the plan? I think the
Right.
plan is Aaron's our new guy.
Okay. Question.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a better idea of a answer as far as the timeline goes. If Moses is the one who's meeting with God and Abraham is set up as kind of the mouthpiece, Abraham or
Aaron.
Aaron fails dramatically.
Yes.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
But post Aaron's failure, is that when we start seeing Joshua go with Moses?
Oh, interesting. He's seen beforehand.
Okay.
A little bit being like an aid to Moses, but that's interesting. I need to think on.
But it's interesting. He ends up being the high priest still, nonetheless. The other thing is the Aaron replacing for Moses. That's not the it's Yahweh's the important person,
Yeah,
not Moses.
right, yeah.
And we do the same thing, right?
we do the same
We want to put our pastors on a pedestal, right?
Right.
And that's a dangerous place for them to be.
Absolutely. Or we want to sanctify. We want to sanctify the thing I'm already doing, as if it's God's will for me. So I'll hear this all the time, and I used to hear it a lot more when I was like more youth ministry minded. Well, God is going to. God told me to date this person, and then when that goes up in flames, then they go, "Well, God led me to that, and God wanted me to experience all of those things." That's kind of what I think is going. Like we can't baptize our sin.
Yeah.
As if that was God's intention for us. No, it's that God can make good on those sins. It's going back to Genesis 50. What we intended or you intended for evil, God can turn for good. That doesn't mean He desired you to walk that in the first place. There is a major distinction to be made in there. And so, yeah, we do the same thing all the time with our sin. Either we sin willingly, knowing that we would rather have the sin and the temporary pleasure or joy of the sin, or we do this thing where we baptize and justify ourselves, as opposed to worshiping God or following Him as He prescribes.
Right. And what's in here is a factory of idolatry. And you know, and so in that, and you think of that, I am mass producing my own versions of Jesus. You know, I'm making Jesus a bigger version of me. And I don't think that's every now and then. I think that's every day. You know, and that's part of the crucifying the flesh. It's
Who's getting conformed to whose image?
right.
Always.
Yes.
So this goes back to the identity thing.
Yeah.
What are the results of that too? Because yes, Jesus is my savior. He calls me friend. His words. You know, He puts that out there.
Yeah.
He's my friend and everything like that. So we have this view of Jesus that it's not wrong, but we often forget that Jesus is God.
It's Lord and Savior.
And in being God and recognizing that, even if I can't quite get my head completely around what being God is, there's an element in that should make me pee my pants a little.
That's really good. That's really good. Which is why I think, and I know maybe we're jumping ahead, and maybe we haven't answered the initial question you asked, but in Exodus 34, when this figure that Moses is meeting with face to face, now suddenly says, you can't see my face,
Right.
I think is so important, because there's a divinity claim that it's not just, that there's no distinction between this face-to-face person that Moses is seeing and the unseen creator of all things.
I am just going to kick that a few more minutes
Okay,
down
that's
the
fine,
road.
that's fine.
I do want to talk about it, but just
That was the preview.
not yet. Yeah. It kind of gets us back
Segue.
on where I was. So with this tent of meeting individual, and when God says, I will send an angel with you so that you can still inherit the land or whatever. A lot of these Christophany or theophany moments that we were talking about, you said it, we got it from Seth, every time we have a locality and physicality, this is a pre-incarnate appearance of
That's right.
Jesus, which is a great way to say that. So with this person that's in the tent of meeting, I'm very ready to identify that as Christ.
Who we would call Jesus.
Yeah, and then thinking about, okay, through the narrative so far, the angel of the Lord has been another instance where it's like, okay, are we talking about another one of these? This is Jesus.
Right.
As far as who's in the tent, I'm ready to identify it. Who is this angel that God is saying, I will send with you?
Yeah.
When he says, I won't go with you, but I will send an angel that you may inherit the land. I want to know I'm curious about the identity, because I almost want to jump in and say like, oh, well, this is going to be another
Christophany.
Christophany moment.
Right.
But that would almost require that I split the union or the person of God
Interesting.
and this angel, because God says, I will not go with you.
Right.
It almost means this can't be an angel of the Lord or Christophany moment.
Okay, well, hold on. I would want to distinguish though between God's actions and his presence.
Okay.
So it is that his actions signal his presence, but there is a distinction between. I'm trying to think of an example here, like there's a distinction between the thing that is ascribed as God doing it, and maybe an agent who is the doer. And so, like for instance, when in 2 Kings the divine council is meeting, and I know I'm throwing out words that maybe we haven't fully. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. But when God is meeting with the heavenly host, okay, and he's saying, who's gonna go out and is gonna take care of the situation with Hezekiah and the conquering army that's coming, and one of the angelic beings pops up,
Right.
and says, here's what we'll do.
Yep.
We'll put a lying voice in the spirit of the prophets, or whatever it is. Okay, whatever the examples are. Now that is all God's will and it's all God's doing, but there is an agent that is going to do the thing, to do his bidding. So it's his presence is still here, even though his agency or his action is out here.
So I think that's the distinction I'm wanting to make. And maybe I'm breaking things up too much. The angel of the Lord.
Yes.
I become increasingly convinced that this is Jesus.
Me too.
Okay.
Now, I will send an angel with you.
Correct.
Am I being too hasty if I'm like, oh, well, this is another Jesus moment? Because the thing that would split those two to me, if you're saying, hey, there can be an active agent, but his presence isn't here. If that active agent is himself,
Yes.
what does that mean? So I'm almost wondering, is it helpful if I framed it like, well, go ahead.
In the same way that Moses can be encountering Jesus face to face, and yet if my full presence, my full glory, is revealed, you would be unmade.
Okay.
So in the same sense that the pillar of cloud can fall in front of the tent of meeting to guard its entrance, and he can be meeting face to face with a physical person.
Okay.
So what I'm not saying is that Jesus is ever out of the presence of God the Father. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the ambiguity is written there on purpose for us to ask these questions. So now I don't know if the angel of the Lord is the one that's going to go ahead. However, I would be inclined to say it is, because that's been the angel that's been talked about so far. throughout the narrative. Okay, it's not the only angel talked about,
Right.
Because there was a moment where angels come to meet with I think it's Jacob and minister to him after the meet, or maybe before the meeting of Esau or after. I can't remember now.
I mean, even when the
Abraham,
three meet
yeah.
Abraham.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I-
So I wouldn't want to say that Jesus is not present to the Father, or that they're ever separate. I don't want to use the word separate, but I do want to use the word distinct.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah.
They're never pulled
Yes.
apart, but they are distinct beings.
right.
No, they're distinct persons.
Right. Yeah.
They're distinct persons who are one being.
So I think I would put it this way. I think my first inclination would be to identify it as Jesus. I do have a reluctancy to I'm gonna put a nail in that one and say that's who it is. There is a tension there, or an ambiguity that you were
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah.
That is possible. And I think that pause is a healthy one, because we are talking about
Yeah.
identity.
Correct.
We're talking about unity between Father, Son,
Yes.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And I think that is a reasonable caution to have as we say, like, well, who is this angel?
Yeah.
And are we coming up against too the limitation of the writer?
Right.
You know, and trying to in their best, because God knows our inabilities to map this
Yeah.
this massive thing out, you know, directly. But we also have it in the incarnation of Jesus of Nazareth, where he's, you know, he's humbled, you know, in his divinity. But his, you know, where is his divinity? How's that all play? And I don't know if I can answer all those questions.
Yeah.
But we know that he's not separate
Correct.
from his, you know, he's not been pulled apart, or
Right.
or the Father forsaking the Son, or turning his head on the cross.
Right.
That, you know, I believe it's pretty orthodox to believe that there's no split.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, you know, so is that the same thing? And I really don't know. I don't know if I would have even thought to ask that particular question. So, you know, so it is very interesting.
But what I think is interesting about it too is that, like, this is what God's saying he will do in light of, I will not go with you. So I will send, and let's say an angel, and let's play it as, well, it's not. It's not Jesus. It's not himself. Would that be adequate to carry out what God says he's going to do to get them into the land? Like, of course, even if it is less personal. But what ends up happening is, I will go with you, and then we get a intensely personal revealing of the person of the person of the tent of meeting, which I think is in contrast. I don't know how else to say it. It's so much higher elevated than, like, okay, I will send someone to do what it is I'm going to do. Well, now here's my glory.
Right.
You know, you couldn't get farther apart. I mean, you could, but I think, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm stumbling over that.
Yeah. The actions of God are one. I'm going to see you later. And then, but in the next moment, because of this formational encounter that Moses has been led into to intercede and mediate for the people, is actually, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to intensify my presence
Right.
in you.
That's what I was trying.
Now, but that comes with a caveat, which we're not going to get to for 2 weeks from now.
Okay. All right. Then let's leave it. Next point. Something occurred to me over this last week that it was kind of a new framework for this meeting on the mountain moment, as far as I was ever familiar with it. And you and I have talked, and I haven't run into anybody who's framed it this way yet, as far as well, let me just say it like this. The way that I was familiar with it, and you touched on this on Sunday, is that this is Moses seeing God. And what that immediately brings to mind is when Jesus says, no one has seen God. So, and I feel like my whole life as a Christian, I've just kind of been like, no, okay, it's just kind of what does it mean to see God or see his back or whatever? And just being kind of okay with it. The way that you unpacked it on Sunday, was very clarifying and specific as far as what's going on here. And I think maybe the thing that the linchpin of it to me that really solidified it is what Moses asks for after being in the tent of meeting face to face as one would speak with a friend. You couldn't get more specific as far as like, okay, this is the locality, physicality, interaction thing happening. But Moses's request, I think if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, what does Moses want to do? He says like, oh, I want to see God. That's not what he says. He says, show me your glory, which is wildly different.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, and I think this is the point about, so the Father is unseen, okay, and the Father's spirit. That Jesus himself tells us that God is spirit, and Jesus is the visible Yahweh. And I don't want to say form or mode or expression because none of that is accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, he's just the visible Yahweh. So when you see Jesus, according to the New Testament authors and according to Jesus himself, you have seen the Father. Actually, is what it turns out.
It makes it so huge.
So and I think that's why this moment is such an important moment. It's why the Bible. That's why this is the most quoted verse in the Bible. It's the most quoted verse by the Bible in the Bible. Okay, so it's because what's happening here is that in this face-to-face encounter, Jesus is humbling himself. The visible Yahweh is humbling himself to allow a man to be in his presence who is a compromised person of sin. Okay, and they're communicating face-to-face. But Moses isn't asking to see God the Father. He's asking to see the glory. And he's not asking the Father for that. He's asking the visible Yahweh for that. Okay. So and again, we don't need to try and break those apart.
No, not at all, because that was such a mind-blowing thing to me this week, just pondering over it. Is like, I'm very comfortable with the Christian as recognizing Jesus as God put on flesh, God as a man. And it's like, I am less inclined, I keep running into this as a Christian, I'm less inclined to look at things one way, though they are true, less inclined to see Jesus in his full glory. We get instances of it with like, okay, the transfiguration and then after the resurrection and all that stuff. But am I treating Jesus, am I treating each member of the Trinity with the amount of reverence and awe that is due them, where I feel like I do that with God the Father. I feel like I'm very mystified and overwhelmed by the acts of the Spirit. The hypostatic union. I just wanted to use the word of Christ.
Nice.
Big word day. This is a moment that makes that very substantial.
Yes.
That it is not just God put on flesh and now he's something else. No, he is still fully God.
Yes.
And to think about Jesus in his earthly ministry, still possessing all those things.
Yes.
What is it? I've pondered that a lot as far as like, what does it mean to be fully God, fully man, and all that stuff? I feel like this instance is the instance that kind of explains what that is, in a that Moses could sit down and speak with him face to face as you would speak with a friend, and he holds within himself the ability to reveal his glory.
Right.
This is this is the expression of this clarifies the hypostatic union, all that stuff.
It's the essence. And when we get into like essence, I can't remember who it was that said it. I think it ended up being a heretic, actually, but used the term God of God. And it shows that God can even use the heretics to give us a good,
Tell me more.
I know, but I like to think about that. We're seeing God of God. He is just beyond the whether it be the physical representation or whatever. And you're bringing up such a good point about he's this, but he can be this. Where it's,
And not even can be,
right,
but
oh,
is.
right, yes, yeah. You're right. That's a better way to hammer that
that's
nail
the tricky
in.
thing is that like I think it's those little phrases where it's like, okay, I could talk about it very comfortably and not necessarily arrive at the wrong conclusion, but is it enough? You know? And it's like, okay, the framework of this encounter is helping me engage with not only the text, but also my God and Jesus
Yes.
personally in a way that is more adequate or appropriate for who he actually is. And with what we've talked a lot about today, not in any way separate from the Father or the Spirit.
Correct.
This moment is the visual representation of what that union looks like. I've just been in awe all week over this framework.
And I think that this is so important to grasp on, because I think we have a tendency to hierarchy rank, whether we would say that out loud.
Yeah.
And
we
yeah,
do.
I think my best intentions are to not
Yes.
do that.
'Cause it's
But
hard.
the way I engage with my faith does
And
that.
I'm saying we.
Yeah.
I mean me too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean all people have a hard time describing what even the Trinity is. I mean, this is, and we're always going to struggle, I think,
Right.
at that, because that's the nature of well, that's God. This is the point. And so his being is unlike us, such that we can't even comprehend what it means to be three and in one. So when Jesus now, who we call Jesus, but the visible Yahweh, when he reveals his full glory, that's why what I was saying to Seth earlier, this is such an important moment, because it's not that they're distinct, or again separate entities, that God the Father possesses all the glory, and you know, this figure gets it channeled through him
Right,
every
yeah,
now and again, or
right.
something like that. No, it's in himself. And actually that's what Jesus will say. Life is in the Father and life is in the Son. And so like whatever God is, Jesus is as well. And then we get revealed portraits of that, pictures of that throughout the narrative, not just when Jesus shows up on the scene in his incarnation. And so what I think he's doing here is he is making a claim to Moses. Moses already knows this guy is God, but he's now witnessing the full godness of God. Does that make sense?
And I think
It's an interesting way to describe it.
it just gets bigger and bigger in my head, because like what you were saying, like, it is very hard to engage with the idea of God 3 in 1, like a Trinity thing, where it's like, okay, that is essential to our faith as Christians. How do I engage with that? I feel like this passage is really clarifying, really gives me something to hold on to. But it doesn't mean I got it cracked.
Right.
Like, okay, now I understand it. But it
Right.
really gives me something substantial to hold on to. And what I kind of wanted to talk about was, I don't remember specifically, Hebrews 1 or Hebrews 3. Just it helps me engage with things like, I wish I knew it better off the top of my head, but he is he is the full expression of what am I talking about?
The exact representation of the image of is how is actually the word there. It's the exact image of the Father. And I that might be Colossians.
We were jumping back.
Could
We
be
were talking
other
about this earlier this week, and or when it says that Moses saw the invisible God.
That's Hebrews 11.
What does it mean to see the invisible God? Well, that paired with when Jesus says, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." Well, to see God means to see Jesus.
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's a real good shortcut to like, well, who was Moses sitting down with in this tent?
Yeah.
I think it was Jesus.
Yes. Hebrews 1.
Hebrews 1. Okay.
In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets, and at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory. I wonder where we're getting that language.
Yeah.
I wonder where
Holy
we're getting
Moses.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Pun intended.
Sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. So he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. Yeah.
So Jonathan Edwards, famous Puritan, I always liked his. He had a take, and not that this is gonna clear it all up, but you know, he was, you know, if God had a thought of himself, you know, as you know, and we think of that, you know, we're sentient, we have a thought of ourselves, and you know, almost like if God were to look into a mirror, he would see Jesus. You know, so if the Father were to look into the mirror, he would see the Son. And I've always kind of liked that. That doesn't make that a perfect
Right.
metaphor or anything like that. And but there is a glory aspect, I think, that we, you know, that does tie into the transfiguration that we're seeing there. But even that, I think, is limited.
Yes, I agree.
You know,
I agree.
And but we know something major is happening, and I always like when we're just in case we don't catch something like the Pharisees or the disciples come to our rescue, you know, because what's Peter doing? You know, Peter, let me build some booths, you know, and Peter's probably thinking, oh, great, there's Moses and Elijah. So here, booth for Jesus, booth for Elijah, you know, and so even Peter, he's like kind of doing the right thing in a sense, but he's kind of missing the point of it there too. But I fully believe Jesus stops his full glory from being from being shown there, because by right and by virtue and by right, he could go on into glory at that moment. But then what Scripture tells us, then he
Sets his face
towards the cross.
Yeah.
You know, and so even then we're not getting the full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of have a question about that. Like I have so many questions, guys.
Yeah.
I think when I've read that bit before, I would just be like, oh wow, Peter, who's all there? Peter, James, and John?
Yeah.
I've always thought of it as just like they're in awe. They don't understand what's going on.
Right.
That Peter's suggestion is to set up one for Moses and Elijah. Does it ping in Peter's mind? Oh, this is a revealing of his glory moment, like Moses had. Which again, like, if we've arrived here so far in the narrative, and I'm like, all right, this is happening to Moses. Well, he mentions Elijah too. Familiar with that? Like, well, once we get to Elijah, what kind of glory reveal is Elijah going to have that I wasn't tuned into before? It just, what is this back and forth echo that happens through the whole biblical narrative?
Right.
Well, and I'm glad that we're pinging on this idea right now, because I think that's exactly what's going on. Is that Jesus is tapping into the story via typology. So he's utilizing a type from the story, a symbol or an image, a portrait of some kind that's going on in the Old Testament to declare his divinity status. And to prove to these particular three disciples that happened to be with him at that time, well, he takes them with him. And he's also doing this not just for their benefit, I think, because of the geographical context that's stated. I think he's also doing it for a spiritual warfare declaration as well. I think there's some, because of the mountain he's on.
Yes.
And the scene that we just saw about the gates of hell not being able to prevail against the church that Jesus is going to start. Okay, I think all of that context is wrapped around what's going on here in the golden calf narrative, and in the rebellion of the people narrative, along with Moses' encounter with Jesus in his full glory, because then Jesus is echoing that, and he is revealing his glory in a measured way, of course, because they couldn't all see it; they'd be dead.
Right.
That's the whole point. But it's on a mountain. It's the Son of God. It's Moses and Elijah who comprise the law and prophets. You nailed it. You nailed it. And then God's voice comes from heaven. This is my son. Listen to him.
Right.
Which is the injunction, the command that Moses then picks up in the heartbeat of the Old Testament, which is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and on. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Hear. Shema. That's what God is commanding these disciples, who are also representatives of Israel in that they're 12. So there's just so much echo going on here on purpose. I think Jesus is tapping into the story that they understand. So I don't yet know it, and I need to do some study on this. But how does the Feast of Booths relate to God's
Yep.
glory being revealed? So that's the thing that I don't yet know.
I was just
But it's interesting too
I
that
would like to study.
because the famous woman caught in adultery is, if I'm remembering correctly, during the Feast of Booths,
Oh,
and
not caught that detail.
and that is also when Jesus, he puts out, you without sin, or is he saying you without this sin? I'm not sure, but you without sin, and then he gets, what does he do? He kneels down and he starts to write something
Yeah.
in the sand, and as I think about that, it's Jesus' finger that is, carving out the Ten Commandments. It's the Son, and I wonder if there's some correlation between that and what he's writing in the sand. And we'll never know what he's writing in the sand. But wouldn't it be interesting if he was starting with one? Here's the first commandment. And that sort of thing. But I find it interesting. And it seems like I picked that up, that this is taking place during, because that could be an opportune time for adultery, because they're all outside, and everyone's just kind of hanging about.
Interesting.
And so
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
That's so interesting to me. Now catch this from Jeremiah 17. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all who forsake you shall be put to shame. Those who turn away from you shall be written in the earth. Written in the sand.
right.
For they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. And then the next chapter is about the libation ceremony, where Jesus shows up. Okay, hold on. Yeah. I don't have this all connected yet.
Right.
This is an
the
interesting
Feast of Booths
conversation.
where they're doing that water pouring.
I think it might be the culmination of the Feast of Booths, where they come out. There's actually a whole ceremony where the priests will come out with the water
jugs, yeah.
Everybody's cheering like God's provision for us. Well, yeah. And then when they all stop their cheering as the priest goes to pour out the water, and I forget into what basin or into
I
what.
think the final one is empty, isn't it?
Oh, is that the case? I
It's
can't remember.
representative, and then Jesus is like, "That's me."
That's when he and it says in John chapter 8 where this is when it says on the last and greatest day of the feast, he stood up and he announces, "I am," Jeremiah 17:13, living water. This is fascinating.
This is very good.
I can't wait till we get to our series in John.
Yeah.
This exile thing's taking too long, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
So I don't know
feed
what all
each
these
other.
connections are yet, but I wonder if there's something that's combining them all.
Okay, can I try to bite on something else?
Yes.
This isn't going to be as exciting as.
Oh, that's
Zach
okay.
pointed out. So when we were talking about the revealing of His glory, and with Peter, James, and John. And then he sets his face towards the cross. I'm wondering, I can't find the timeline of it. I just thought of this now. Post this show me your glory moment with Moses, how long after the narrative is it until Moses has to erect that pillar with the serpent of bronze in the wilderness that they have to turn to
that's a good
for their salvation?
I don't know. But
I'm wondering if there's a parallel going on there as far as the revealing of glory and the means for salvation.
because in Jesus' case, I think it's within the week that
Yeah.
from transfiguration to cross. I think that's
It's really tight.
yeah.
The
It's
time frame is really
right.
tight.
That's what I'm wondering. It's kind of hard. I'm having trouble finding it because there's so much law ordinance that happens.
Yeah, and I want to say it's some part of Numbers, and it's post. I think it's post rebellion at the Jordan. It's post spies. I think. Let me just look it up. When does
you got it.
when does the serpent in the wilderness, bronze serpent? The internet can be your friend, everybody. Let's see what it say. Numbers 21. So is that
I guess there's a lot that happens between
it
there.
occurs at the end of the Israelites' 40 years of wandering in the
Yeah.
wilderness. So Yeah, I don't know if we can constrain that too hard. But again, again, even as I said this, I think we're talking typologically, right? We don't always have to have things lined up with exactitude, if that makes sense. A lot of times what Jesus is playing on is types, is symbols and those kinds of things. So even, well, and Jesus himself utilizes this narrative when he's doing his famous passage in John chapter 3. He's talking about how you have to look to the Son of Man who will be lifted up.
Right.
And that's who you have to believe in. So like the serpent in the wandering or in the desert, I think he says. So anyway, even if it's not a exact chronological connection, there could still be a typological.
Right.
And also too, and just I had mentioned it before we were on camera too. From the point Moses is hid in the cleft of the rock. The hands protecting him. He sees the tail end of Yahweh's glory, and he's lit up. We know the story. But this is something that, because you, David, in your sermon this past Sunday, were saying that, God, man could not compromised. Man cannot handle God's full glory, but yet apparently the mountains could. The rocks could, and so I just wanted to kind of introduce that point or put that point in there. Is this what Jesus is saying in his triumphal entry when he's told to tell them to stop worshiping you? And he says if they did, the rocks themselves would cry out because the rocks have witnessed. He doesn't say trees.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, witness. He didn't say all the goats will or all the all the llamas will. The llamas would if he says rocks. Now that doesn't mean he can't be saying all creation either.
Sure. But it is interesting that rocks is specified.
And we are dealing with rocks when he reveals his glory to Moses. And so anyway, just something to think about.
What a cool connection. What else you got for us, Devin?
Something that really struck me that I know Seth and I have talked about this before, maybe like a year ago, but you mentioned on Sunday that, we read something like this and we can think like, oh, we want moments like this. We want to be like Moses.
Right.
But what Moses would want is to be like us. And I'd love to pick your guys' brains about what that statement is. It means a lot to me, but I kind of want to hear what you guys think of that.
Yeah. I don't remember our conversation
on that. I could keep talking.
David's looking it up right now.
I'm looking up the passage. This is directly out of Jesus's mouth. For truly, Matthew 13:17, for truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Luke 10:24, for I tell you that many prophets and kings desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So I'm utilizing that idea to say, I think we often think that we want to be in these, Old Testament, like glory moments or miracle moments or something like that. And I think what Jesus is trying to reorient us around is that you are seeing, as Hebrews said, the exact representation of the Father. Like you are experiencing the better thing. In Jesus' day, it's the incarnate. The Word became flesh. It's God become man. You're getting the better thing, which is that God is among you in a way that you had not experienced before. Which does make a distinction between the pre-incarnate Jesus and the incarnate Jesus, because the incarnate Jesus is the final and full joining of God and human flesh,
Right.
And it comes with all these associated ideas from the prophets, which Jesus is utilizing here to say that you wish you could be back there, they wish you could be right here. I mean, that is the thing going on, and actually even better is that we have the Spirit of God residing within us.
Yes.
Which is even more fully expressed in what Jesus is talking about, is that the Holy Spirit now lives within us. And this is even and we're going to make this pit stop, I think, in 3 weeks. I haven't yet written it, but in 3 weeks from now, we're going to make a pit stop in Numbers. We're actually going to talk about it a little bit in 2 weeks from now. as we examine Exodus chapter 35, because there is a person who is said for the first time in the Bible to have the Spirit of God upon him, to be filled with the Spirit, and that's all.
First time.
First time. That's all.
Person, not a mountain or a tent
Correct.
or a tabernacle.
This is the first time a person is someone is mentioned as having been filled with the Spirit. Okay, and that's old Bezalel, who is going to be the great tabernacle worker.
We did talk about this a little bit
Yes.
last episode. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so we're going to get what I would call foreshadows to what God is really up to and after, which is that yes, the cross, yes, redemption, yes, resurrection, yes, the glorification of Jesus, all those things. But the other thing that he's after is the thing that Moses is going to hit on in his prophetic ministry through the writing of Numbers and Deuteronomy as well. And it has something to do with the Spirit.
It does make me wonder though, like it seems, if I think about Moses and his encounters with God, and to think about Jesus's earthly ministry, like, okay, we can call that better, you know, or more full, maybe.
Yeah.
What does that mean to the Christian living now? Where it's like, okay, I could jump way back in the timeline and be like, well, you know, Moses was meeting with God in this tent and on the mountain. Is there part of me that should want that as well? Or to think, well, from where I am now, wouldn't I want to be alive during Jesus's earthly ministry?
Yeah.
Do I have less than they had in the position that I'm in now? And I think no.
I
think no. But for exactly the reason you said, as far as the Spirit is in us, He's picked his temple, his tabernacle, his dwelling place to be within you and I.
You got it.
And so is God withholding himself by putting me in this point in history versus anything else in the biblical narrative? And I think no. But what it does make me wonder is like, okay, if that's true, and I do think that that is true, let's say that Moses was suddenly sitting here at the table with us. Would he recognize something in the Christian living today that he has encountered in the tent of meeting or on the mountain that we would be unaware of, you know? Well, like for him to witness the Spirit of God come over this tent or this mountain, or someone like Bezalel, would he recognize that in the Christian today? You know, that we're take for granted? I don't know. What does that mean?
Yeah. I think he would say, how do you approach God? Because that's the ministry, right? Like, how is it that you experience or encounter God in your midst?
So maybe less of a like, he can see a glory in us that we can't see in one another, but more of, oh, you have an access and a personal, I guess, relationship.
So you're telling me that the cherubim no longer guard the most holy.
There's no veil.
You're telling me there's no more veil. You're telling me that all the people have the Spirit of God living within them who believe by faith. That's what you're telling me. I would have dreamed for such a day.
You know, it's almost like something like our parents or our grandparents would say, you know, when I was a kid, you know, we had to walk to school in the snow uphill both ways, well, you know, and you're telling me you've got the Spirit of God living in you?
Yeah.
You know?
That's to put it this way, for where we're at in the story, he's having this back and forth with Moses that says, I will not go with you. Oh, I will go with you. Like, I am in you?
Yes. That is the radical thing that happens in the new covenant. Most fully seen in the day of Pentecost and then in the Acts of the Apostles. So I think Moses longs to see our day, because Moses realizes even within his own timeline that the law is not complete, or it's not the completion of the redemptive plan of God, to bring that snake crusher about. And so I think he would. So, okay, but to the next element of your question, would he be able to see God's glory upon us? I think he would be able to see God's glory upon us when we live out our image-bearing vocational status and call.
So he would recognize it in us when we look like him.
Correct.
Okay.
Which again, we don't look like him in the way Moses did, where we're radiating light, but we're radiating the Spirit's presence within us via the fruits of the Spirit, which is what we talked about last week, right, Jim? That love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. And so I think that's what he would marvel at. And then I think he would go, okay, so why aren't you living that way at every moment?
No,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of
You
like
know?
one of those things where like
that
with
hurts.
yeah, it does.
Because again, I longed for that. I wanted to see God's glory, and I had that glimpse. And you're saying that you have now known the exact representation
Yeah.
of the Father, and you're not living for him at every moment, and not every moment is a missional and formational opportunity for you to, you get it. Everything Paul writes in the New
And
Testament.
how much would we look like the Israelites as a stiff-necked,
Yeah.
stubborn?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
With everything that's been afforded. I mean, even Jesus, in his own words, is saying it's better that I go.
Correct.
You know that. So the one who comes after me, and we do. There probably is a taking it for granted, or just a not living in.
Yeah.
Hopefully he wouldn't call us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
right,
that's
yeah.
the that's the,
That's the whole
Right.
point.
Yeah.
so if we're
use
thinking
the
of it
same
on,
language.
on these terms, as far as like he would recognize us when we look like him, I think the sad truth is like the mirror that's being held up to us in this narrative is
Yes.
we look like Israel.
Yeah.
Like, we're
So related to the reflected glory idea, I want to read Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage that Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. And I've in a past
who has a pen?
Jim.
4:13, Acts 4:13. But and again, this was a point of a previous pastor when he went through Acts. He made a big deal of, reflecting Jesus. They had been with, they were astonished, and they took note that he had been with Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's powerful.
yeah, reflected glory.
Reflected glory, borrowed light. Wow. And there it is, right in the narrative. They were astounded. They were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Yeah. And I think that's I think that's exactly what the people are experiencing when Moses comes down from the cleft of the rock. Is they're like,
Whoa.
that's a lot.
That's a lot to take in.
That's a lot.
There's something you don't see every
Mo.
day.
That's a lot to take in, Mo.
Old Mo's been with God.
Yeah.
His face is lit up again. Tell him to get the veil on. He's freaking out the kids.
Right. Yeah.
That's what is being said in a different kind of way here in the New Testament. Oh my goodness. Thanks for bringing that verse up. That's crazy.
That's a good one, Jim. Just another note on this dialogue that happens between Moses and God, and that shift from "I will not go with you" to "I will go with you." Another thing that really stood out to me is that we already talked about God almost puts this offer on the table, like rather than through this nation, well, I'll do it through you, Moses. I'll make you a great nation. It's this promise we've seen before, but now it's directed at him. After Moses advocates for the people via God's character, God doesn't double down on the offer to like, okay, through you, Moses, I'll just keep doing my plan. After appealing to God's own character, Moses becomes not a option for being a remnant to carry it out, but becomes an intercessor, in that the benefits of this dialogue don't only happen towards Moses, they happen towards all the people. And I think that that's super important, because Moses, like we said before, isn't adequate or able to do anything for the people on his own. But he can call God's character to account or remembrance in a way that does benefit the people. It's like, and I think that is really, really fascinating.
I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
I was to say, isn't that kind of like Israel just doesn't benefit just Israel, but through Christ, it benefits all
Yes.
nations.
Yeah.
We don't just benefit.
Right, yeah, right.
But we are meant to be a blessing.
And I
Like
stepped
Israel.
on you there. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah,
That's a great summation of that.
And I think this is what Paul's striking on a little bit here in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. For Christ's love compels us because we are convinced that one died for all and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone, the new is here. And all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. And what's that ministry? That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. So here's the appeal. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who knew no sin for us. Who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so it's as if Paul is saying, here's my ministry. My ministry is to intercede for you and to bring about the message of reconciliation. And I think that it's not just, or rather, I'm going to be an ambassador of the message of reconciliation. And a part of the message of reconciliation is that I'm through my work, my service, my presence, my communication, all the things, right? My life, I'm going to offer it as a blessing and benefit to those around me. And whether you're a believer or not, you're gonna catch God's glory hopefully coming off of me. I mean, that's a part of the point that I think Paul's trying to make here. So it's not that just Israel benefits, it's that they're supposed to be a witness. Yeah, that's it.
It's not just Moses. The whole nation's supposed to reflect God's glory.
And now we're back to the original design.
Yeah.
Image bearers, angled mirrors.
Yes.
That is what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be spreading the life of Eden. The problem is we're in exile. So how do we do that in exile? Okay. So we got to keep Christ in front of us, and within us through the power of the Spirit and the ministry of the Spirit, so that we can then bless others. And that's why I would say this is what Christians throughout history have done. This is what they have done, and they've been mixed bags like all of us.
Right.
And I think, I mean, this ties into our final talking point if we have time. This is what Christianity has looked like. It's also what it's looked like in the narrative so far.
Right.
Because the people ask the question, oh, if you don't go with us, what else will distinguish us from the other peoples of the earth?
Very good.
And the answer to that question, I think, is answered in Abraham, Isaac,
Yes.
and Jacob, and Joseph. Each one of those as individuals, whoever they were, whatever land they were dwelling in,
Yeah.
or whatever employer they were under, or empire they were under, there was always an instance where they recognized that the Lord was with them.
Correct.
And then those authorities or places wanted to attach themselves to those individuals to share part in that blessing. And that's not nefarious or wrong in and of itself, depending on what you're after.
Correct.
That's really the offer that's on the table with the commission to be a blessing to all nations.
Right.
So what is it that will distinguish us from the other peoples of the earth is that God goes with them.
Correct.
They long to see his glory, and you guys were talking all, and it's great. It's wonderful, the God in us, but that results in a human flourishing that I think the world doesn't recognize. Maybe some, but lots of people in the world don't recognize the tremendous human flourishing that has resulted from the gospel.
100% true.
To everyone even to those who don't believe in Jesus.
Correct.
And as Peter would have, as he did call us, the living stones, where people would make the pilgrimage to the temple, and then of course the temple is destroyed and now we are the living stones. So instead of the pilgrimage to the temple, we are now the little stones making the pilgrimage to the nations.
Yeah.
And causing the result being of what you're saying.
That's it.
The flourishing of
And another echo of, the people wouldn't go to see Yahweh on the mountain, but the Yahweh came to them, and hopefully
So good.
continues to come to the world through the church.
That's it. That's it. There's too much more we could say.
Oh, David. Can I just tag one thing on that, Jim? I loved how you put that, because we have this big picture behind us of the Tower of Babel, and it's like, okay, on our terms, we were ready to build a high place or a mountain,
Yep.
and very much ready to ascend it on our terms. But when God comes down, were we willing to meet him on his? It's like, oh no. But it's just,
Yeah.
sorry, tie it off.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that, Jim.
Yeah, that's really good. Any other words, anybody?
I don't think so.
Cool. Thank you guys for joining in again. I hope that this episode blessed you. Thank you guys for joining again with us. This has been so much fun. I love doing these so much. We'll continue to do these. We've got an interesting sermon coming up this Sunday. It's going to be shorter, much shorter, in fact, half as short, in fact, in word count.
Big
So we're going to do a short sermon, and we're going to contemplate Exodus 34. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to hit back running with the narrative again in Exodus 35. We're going to finish out Exodus chapter 40, 35 through 40 in the following sermon, which will be October 19th. Then we're going to start going into, actually we're going to kind of pass over Leviticus, and then we're going to jump into Numbers. Numbers and Deuteronomy make a pit stop on our way to the conquest of the land of Canaan. Some really interesting, again, foreground, background, spiritual warfare, exile, communication happening throughout that whole text. So we'll look at some of that, and then we're going to jump right into the nation of Israel being established in Saul and David, and talking about how significant that is for our next chapter, which would be chapter 4 in our shorthand 9-chapter framework. So we're plugging right along here. We're going to start speeding up. I understand I keep saying that, but we really are going to start speeding up after we get out of Exodus, because after Exodus, the next most significant things that happen are nation and then exile. And then now we're into Jesus after that. So, hey, I hope you guys are enjoying our series. I hope you're enjoying these conversations that we're having. We're going to keep putting these out. And so we hope that you guys are watching. Share these, on your whatever platform that you would choose. And we'd love to see, the reach of this go out a little bit, just as a teaching tool and as a blessing for people as they study their own Bibles at home. We hope that it's blessed you. As always, send your questions off to the office or in the comments here. We'll do our best to answer those. Thanks for joining in.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Cutting Room Floor. If you have any questions or want to know more about what we discussed, send an email to Church on the Rock. Like and subscribe to receive notifications for any videos we post. May God bless your study of His Word.